Hey class, welcome back to WH2 Session. I hope you're all doing well today. In today's lecture, we'll be looking at the beginning of the First World War. And of course, with many different things that take place in history, there's always a setup, something that takes place before the actual event for that event to occur. And so that's what happens in World War I. The world just didn't all of a sudden decide to start a big war and start attacking one another. There's some things set up beforehand, and there's some treaties and alliances that are made, and then there's going to be a spark where one country declares war on another, and then another one falls in and declares war on another country. Before you know it, all the countries honor their alliances and declare war on one another, which leads to an entire world war. In today's PowerPoint, we're not going to be looking at any great detail of the war itself yet. That'll be in upcoming PowerPoints. But in today's PowerPoint is going to be looking at the beginning or what started the war. The First World War. As you can see there on the picture, this is a very well-known or famous picture of the First World War, of the British soldiers walking across. They're called duckboards, those little pathways made out of wood, and you can just see the mud, the filth, the destruction. The trees are just completely destroyed. Introduction. What do you think of when you hear the First World War or World War I? So these are some things that come to mind. Well, obviously, if there's a First World War, there has to be a second one to follow. It was not called the First World War at the time. It's not like in 1914 they said we're going to start the First World War. It was given that name after the Second World War started. You think of there's a Second World War. You think of trenches. You think of mud, like that picture I just showed you. You think of machine guns. You think of gas attacks. Maybe you've heard of the other names of the First World War. Other names are called the Great War. That's what they called it, the Great War. Or they also called it the War to End All Wars because of how destructive it was, but it did not end it, obviously, because there was a Second World War and other wars that would follow. You may think of the term doughboys. Maybe you heard that term before, doughboys. That's what the Americans were called when America joined World War I. Maybe you think of the tanks. That was the first introduction of tanks in warfare. Maybe you think of the term over the top. Over the top means when the soldiers left the trenches and charged out into no man's land. They went over the top of the trench and they ran across facing the machine guns. So these are some things that you may think of when you think of the First World War. So we're going to get into the beginnings of the war in this PowerPoint slide. Background. How did it start? So we first have to talk about Germany in the 19th century into the 20th century. And it's the emperor of Germany there on the screen, Wilhelm, because in German, Wilhelm II of Germany. His life, 1859 to 1941. And he reigned as emperor from 1888 to 1918. He reigned during the Germany's Second Reich. He reigned during that time. And you can see he reigned until 1918 because that's when World War I ended and Germany lost. And so he was done because it went from being an emperor, an empire, to a democracy, which is called Weimar Germany after the war. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Notice what his family relations, as I've mentioned in previous lectures, the relations between the countries in Europe were very intricate because they would intermarry, they would arrange marriages, and they would do these different alliances through family members. And Queen Victoria was notorious for doing this. She married her children off into the other royal families in Europe, and that's what happened. Queen Victoria married her daughter off into the royal family in Germany, and Wilhelm II was the grandson of Queen Victoria, and they're going to go to war. England is going to be at war with Germany during World War I. So you wouldn't even think of that the grandson of Queen Victoria is the leader of Germany, who is going to be fighting against England. But Wilhelm II, he was overtly a militaristic leader. He was an army, military kind of a guy, very militaristic. He believed in a very strong military. And so, as I've mentioned before, when you have a couple of bullies on the block, it's just a matter of time until they start fighting. And so that's what happens. So when Germany is the big powerhouse in
Europe, and they have a big military, and they're investing in their military, and they're getting a bigger military, and they're doing different maneuvers in Europe to show their strength and their military strength. Well, other countries are going to take notice of that, and they're going to want to build up their militaries because they don't want to be threatened. And so next thing you know, you have several powerhouses of military might in Europe. And so it's just going to come to a head and fight. He also had a great focus on the German Navy under Admiral Tirpitz, and he invested a lot into the Navy because during World War I, Germany does use their Navy, especially their submarines. He was openly critical of the English King Edward VII, and that's the son of Queen Victoria. You may have heard of Edwardian England. So you had Victorian England, and the next was Edwardian England. So Edward VII, who was the son of Queen Victoria, he was king. Well, his relation there, Wilhelm II, he was very critical of Edward VII. In 1908, Wilhelm II suffered a nervous breakdown, which really kind of didn't help. He almost kind of started moving into just being a figurehead, and the military, he was still the emperor, but like the military really started to overshadow him, and the military was what was really kind of running the show. He encouraged Austria-Hungary. Now I've seen two spellings of Austria-Hungary. There's several. You can call it Austro-Hungarian Empire and all that. The spellings I've found were Hungary or Hungry. So I might even have it several different ways in this PowerPoint. But Austria-Hungary, he encouraged them to attack Serbia after the Archduke was assassinated. And we're going to get to that story coming up, so don't worry about that. But my point is that he really encouraged Austria-Hungary to attack Serbia. Okay, so that's the important part. So you just kind of get this idea that Germany was the powerhouse and was very influential on the beginning of World War I. Okay, so background, continuing, how did it start? Well, so we talked about Wilhelm II, but then number two, new nations were created during the 19th century. We had talked about that in previous PowerPoints about the nation building. Well, when you get these nations together, well, it's going to cause an issue. Germany was created after the Franco-Prussian War. Germany, the states came together and created the Second Reich. Germany is very harsh to France after the Franco-Prussian War. And if you remember, we talked about Otto von Bismarck's realpolitik. It didn't matter who you offended or whatever. It's just get the job done, and that's what happened. Well, the Treaty of Frankfurt made Germany the primary power in Europe, and they put heavy war reparations on France in an effort to destroy France. And so if you remember that, the Germany was able to get Alsace-Lorraine, they were able to have the coal, they were able to have the industry, and France lost it. So Germany was created. The next one that we had talked about previously was Italy was created in the late 1800s. Remember, they shook Austrian control away, so Italy became its own nation. They want land, they want respect because they're a new country and they want to be recognized. Then Austro-Hungary, in 1867, it was united under a new constitution, and they want to expand. So it wasn't just Austria now, it was a combination of the two coming together, the Austrian Empire, the Hungarian Empire. They come together under this new constitution. Before World War I, it was actually the largest empire in Europe in regards to space because it had over 700,000 square kilometers of territory. That encompassed a lot of different people groups, which is going to come back and haunt them. So each empire, although united, they did have separate governments, okay? So it's kind of an odd situation. They have this constitution that brings them together, but they had these different characteristics. Number one, they were a dual monarchy. Okay, that's kind of odd to say. It's united, but they have two monarchies. Which we're going to check out number 4 below. Number two, they or different ethnic groups and languages came together in this empire. There was industrial growth. When you bring these two empires together, there's industrial growth. And industrial growth, especially in a militaristic society in Europe, means we need to build a large military. And then number 4, the government was actually, basically led by Emperor Franz Joseph. He was Austrian. So even though there was a dual monarchy, Austria was kind of like leading the way for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Number 5, they had a very powerful military, but here's the thing, it was hampered by language barriers and ethnic practices and traditions. So even though they had a larger military machine, basically just the language barrier caused issues. So it kind of broke down that way, and that would be overcome in World War I because they needed so many bodies, so many soldiers. It didn't matter what they spoke, they went to the front line speaking their own languages. These nations threatened the stability that the Congress of Vienna of 1815 created in Europe. So if you remember back, we talked about the Congress of Vienna in a separate PowerPoint. The whole purpose of the Congress of Vienna after the Napoleonic Wars was to create a stability in Europe, and they kind of redrew some of the map and established these things. And it was a limited success for about 90 years because it did kind of cause some stability in Europe. But it did not last because in the end, these nations ended up threatening one another with the alliances that they formed pre-World War I, and it just shows that the Congress of Vienna came to a failure. Number 3, so we talked about Wilhelm II, we talked about new nations being created, and then number 3 was alliances were formed. And this is very important. This will be on your exam. Very important. So they formed these alliances, and these alliances were for safety. The point of the Congress of Vienna was to basically make one country will not be more powerful than another, which of course that never works. And so some of the countries decided to talk with one another and have negotiations with one another to have safety, come to their aid. One country will come to the aid of another, which actually these safety alliances would end up drawing millions of soldiers, millions of men to their deaths. It ends up destroying nations, destroying monarchies. Everything that the Congress of Vienna set out to establish would come to an end, and it came to an end with these alliances that were formed. The first alliance we're going to talk about is called the Triple Alliance. Okay, the Triple Alliance. And this came together, a joining of these countries to face France. And it almost came forth to have a revenge, to protect from a revenge by France. Okay, I hope I worded that okay. The Triple Alliance came together in case France wanted a revenge based on how they were treated. And these are the 3 countries that joined together: Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. Okay, so you notice the countries. These are countries that were created during the 19th century. Germany came together as the Second Reich. Italy was created as a country. And Austria-Hungary, they came together. Hungary had been part of the Ottoman Empire that kind of broke away. The Ottoman Empire is still there, but Hungary kind of joined Austria in that alliance, joining together of a dual monarchy. So these three countries or empires, they come together and they join the Triple Alliance to face France in case France wants to take revenge. Well, France is a very old country, much like England is an old country, and you're going to see that alliance coming up in a little bit. So the Triple Alliance becomes known as the Central Powers because they are in Central Europe. 1882, they signed an alliance to aid each other if one of the powers is threatened. So if Germany's threatened or Italy is threatened, they'll come to each other's aid. And this alliance is renewed several times all the way up to the start of World War I. The next alliance we're going to talk about is the Triple Entente. Okay? And sometimes it's just called the Triple Entente. The Triple Entente is an alliance that is to protect German aggression. Okay? And my slide got off a little bit there. Great Britain, France, and Russia, they join together, and they're commonly called the Allies. So you have the Central Powers, and then you have the Allies. And these three come together to protect against German aggression, which is basically the Central Powers. They're the most powerful in the Central Powers. Now, France had not forgotten or forgiven their treatment after the Franco-Prussian War. So that's why the Central Powers were afraid of some kind of a revenge. And the French were determined to curb Germany's power. They saw Germany as a power and they wanted to curb it. Russia was concerned with Germany's alliance with Austria. And we're going to see that in a little bit because Austria is going to do some things in the Balkans, the Balkan region. And that's an area which is like Serbia, basically what would become Yugoslavia after World War I. That area, that region, Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Macedonia, these are areas of Eastern Europe that Russia has strong ties with. And so they're concerned about Germany's alliance with Austria, and Austria is going to have great influence in the Balkans. And then we see Great Britain was concerned of the balance of power on the continent in general. They're an island, and they're looking at Europe, and they're like, oh, look at this. There's this power imbalance going on, and so we're concerned about this, so we're going to join the Triple Entente to kind of help out stop Germany's aggression. And it originated with different treaties that come together in the Triple Entente. And so here we have Great Britain and France go into a treaty in 1904, Great Britain and Russia go into a treaty in 1907, and then all three join a military pact in 1914. So you just see the sides are being drawn, the countries are lining up with one another, and it's going to come to where they're facing against the Central Powers. So the Triple Entente will face the Central Powers, which will become known as the Allies and the Central Powers. They're going to face off with one another, and it's going to be faced off in World War I. Here's Europe, a map of Europe in 1799. So this would be before Napoleon, and you can actually see on the map there Napoleon's actions and additions. But you see, as we talked at length, right here's the Battle of Waterloo, which is going to bring down Napoleon. Okay, so this is a map of Europe in 1799. Here's a map of Europe in 1815 with the Congress of Vienna. So you see now, you begin seeing the establishment of all of these city-states, and Prussia is here, which will become Germany, and this is all going to become Germany. This is Austria, that's going to become the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but you see that it's separate. You see the different states on the Italian peninsula. It's not Italy yet, so you don't have Germany, you don't have Italy. Again, this is 1815, so they have not come together yet. But I want to show you that you have a change from the Napoleonic period. So here's Napoleon, and now here's Congress of Vienna. Okay? And now we have Europe 1911. So now we have a German empire established called the Second German Empire, which is the Second Reich. So we have a German empire. All this is Germany. You have Austria-Hungary. Notice Austria-Hungary down here. Okay, that's Bosnia. And they have basically taken control of Bosnia. This is going to be a big play. This is Sarajevo. This is going to be central for us in just in a few minutes. You have Italy, now a country. So they've come together, and they are now, as it says, the Triple Alliance. You have the Central Powers right here in the center. And then you have the Triple Entente, or the Allies, which is England, France, and Russia. And the Central Powers are not going to like this. Germany is definitely not going to like this. They see a threat here, France. They see a threat here, Russia. And they're basically afraid of being encircled. They're afraid of this two-front war. Okay, so background. Events begin to roll. October 6th of 1908, Austria-Hungary annexes the very small countries of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which used to belong to the Ottoman Empire. I'm going to go back to that map. Okay, so here's the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire kind of crumbled. It still exists. It will still exist during World War I. There's going to be a big issue down here. Look at my cursor here. There's going to be a big issue right here where it says Dardanelles. We're going to look at that a little bit during World War I. The Ottoman Empire is still around, but they lost some territory up here. And Austria-Hungary takes, or annexes, that means basically takes control, incorporates it into Austria-Hungary. This little country here, it's actually two countries called Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's this little tiny country that they take control of, and that used to belong to the Ottoman Empire. And you may say, well, who really cares about that? So what? They take this little tiny country. Well, Russia really cares about it because they view it as serious aggression. Okay, so Russia and the Ottoman Empire, they had some issues before in the past, and now Russia is very interested in this area here, and it's basically based on the Slavic people group. The Slavs, which you may have heard of the countries Yugoslavia or Czechoslovakia. These are the Slavic peoples in this area right here. And Russia has great interest in them because they're of similar people group, because there are Slavs in Russia. Okay, so they see this as serious aggression that Austria-Hungary is now taking Bosnia. They had close relations with Serbia, neighbor to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they're afraid that Serbia is going to be next. Russia encourages pro-Russian, anti-Austrian sentiment in Serbia because Russia fears that Austria is going to want to take Serbia, but in response, Austria fears Serbian expansion based on this pro-Russian sentiment and anti-Austrian sentiment. So I'm going to go back to that picture. So Russia fears that Austria is getting too powerful by going and annexing Bosnia-Herzegovina. So Russia is influencing Serbia. That causes alarm in Austria because Austria is now fearing that Serbia is going to want to expand with Russian backing. Okay, so you just got to kind of follow along with what's going on. There's a lot of power playing going on. Events begin to roll. A tiny spark blows up Europe. And we're going to talk about this. There is one spark that's going to start all of this, and that is going to be the assassination of an archduke. But there are major underlying reasons why World War I happens. And this is going to come into play after World War I when Germany is forced to sign a treaty called the Treaty of Versailles that is going to have a war guilt clause in it. The war guilt clause blames all guilt for the war on Germany. But really, there were major underlying reasons for World War I. It was not just Germany, and everyone blames Germany. World War I started because of these 6 major underlying reasons. Number 1, intense nationalism. Every country, as the country solidified during the 19th century and continued to grow in nationalism and nationalist identity, every country had this intense nationalism. Germany lined up underneath of their emperor, and they were Germans. They were nationalistic. Italy under their leader. England under their king or queen or Victoria or their king. England under their king. France under their leader. So you had this intense nationalism. That's why so many people mobilized to go to war. How could you go from early 19th century revolutionaries who hated their leaders to going to war for their leader in the early 20th century? It's this intense nationalism. There was national ambition. They wanted to show their might. They wanted to show their strength, national ambition. There was ethnic resentment. within these countries, especially when you get down to redrawing the map after the Congress of Vienna of 1815, and you just start redrawing the map and the fall of partial of Ottoman Empire, where you begin to see these different countries of Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia, Macedonia, Bulgaria, Romania, these different ethnic groups. They were Slavic by ethnicity for the most part, but they had different ethnicities, different religions, different identities in these different countries. And so there was this ethnic resentment going on. There was economic interests, colonial rivalry. Okay, so again, remember Africa, the scramble for Africa in the 1880s, and the different European powers wanted all these colonies, and so there was colonial rivalry going on. And then just the overall balance of powers. It had become such a great imbalance that all of these alliances come together, and basically the dominoes start to fall. There was underlying reasons, major reasons for World War I, but a tiny spark starts it all. And it's this. It all started by an unknown young man named Gavrilo Princip. Gavrilo Princip. He started all of this with his actions. And that's him, Gavrilo Princip. He was a Bosnian Serb. Okay, so you start seeing these different ethnicities coming together. He was Bosnian, but he was Serbian. He was born in Bosnia, the country of Bosnia, but he was Serbian by ethnicity. And he wanted to end the control of Austria-Hungary over Bosnia-Herzegovina. So remember that map, Austria had taken Bosnia-Herzegovina. And he wanted to end Austro-Hungarian control over Bosnia and Herzegovina. He belonged to a terrorist group called the Black Hand. That was the name of the group. It was also called the Unification or Death Movement, but it was the actual group was called the Black Hand. And you can see the symbol for the Black Hand. That was their symbol. Does not look very peaceful, obviously. Skull and crossbones on their flag, a grenade next to the hand, a dagger, some kind of coffin with skull and crossbones on it. That was their symbol. It was called the Black Hand. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We're going to continue on with the story here and explaining it out, what takes place for this spark to ignite. The unification of the Slavic people in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Serbia. Okay, now that's going to be what's going to become future Yugoslavia. Okay, that's that area, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Serbia. The unification of these people would be hindered by Austria-Hungary. And so the most symbolic victim that they could attack, that the Black Hand could attack, would be the heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, the Austrian throne. And that is Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was going to become the emperor of Austria when the emperor died, when it was his turn. He would become the emperor. Right now, he's just an archduke. On June 28th, 1914, Princip, this guy on the screen, Princip shoots and kills Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Okay, so the capital of Bosnia is the city of Sarajevo, and he assassinates them. Princip shoots and kills Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. They were there for a visit. Following the assassination, Austria goes into a flurry of diplomatic activity to punish the Serbs. So Austria, their Archduke was just killed by a Bosnian Serb in Bosnia. And so they want to punish the Serbs. July 23rd, 1914, Austria gives Serbia an ultimatum to allow them to conduct their own investigation in Serbia. Okay, so think about this. you have Austria, whose Archduke was just killed, in Bosnia, which they had annexed. Now they want to go into Serbia, which is not part of Austria. That's their own. Serbia is its own country with strong backing by Russia. Austria wants to go into Serbia and conduct their own investigation. Okay, keep that in your mind. That is Archduke Franz Ferdinand on the left and his wife Sophie on the right. And there's been a lot of study on this marriage. And this was a marriage of, not trying to get too romantic on anybody here, but this was a marriage of true love. These two, the Archduke and his wife Sophie, they truly loved one another. And they had many children, and they were just the epitome of a beautiful European couple, obviously upper class. They were nobility. He was going to become the emperor of Austria. She would become the empress. Just a really neat story of how they came together. If you ever did want to do research on that, but husband and wife, strong family. They would be a very strong monarchy in Austria, but they were both killed. This is one of the last photographs of the Archduke and his wife, of Franz Ferdinand and Sophie. They're coming out of the building there in Sarajevo. They're going to get into this car, and they're going to drive down the street, and Princip is going to attack the car and shoot them both. They're in this convertible. So here's a picture of it. They're driving down the road, and Princip jumps out of the crowd and shoots them both. They both die. That's kind of a drawing of it. So this map that I have here, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure why I put the map there. I think just to show you where it's at. So here's the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Here's Bosnia down here. Here's Sarajevo. This is where they're killed by a Bosnian Serb. Okay, so here's Serbia. And then Austria wants to have access and go into Serbia to do their own investigation on the assassination. So that's where we're at right now in the story. Serbia refuses. Okay, so this country here, Serbia, they refuse to let Austria-Hungary do their investigation. July 28th, 1914, Austria-Hungarian Empire declares war on Serbia. So, Princip kills the Archduke. Austria wants to do their own investigation in Serbia. Serbia says no. Austria declares war on Serbia. And then countries fall like dominoes. Okay, so you see here the dates and the declarations of war. July 28th, 1914, Austria declares war on Serbia. Several days later, August 1st, Germany declares war on Russia. August 3rd, because Russia is going to be saying they're going to be threatening through Serbia, they're going to be threatening Austria. Okay, so Germany declares war on Russia. August 3rd, 1914, Germany declares war on France because of they're afraid of the two-front war, Russia and France. Now you may say, well, why in the world did Germany declare war on France then? It's because of the war plan that Germany had. They had to declare war on France based on their war plan. It's called the Schlieffen Plan, and we're going to talk about that. A day later, now Britain declares war on Germany because of the alliances that they had with France and Russia in the Triple Entente. So Britain declares war on Germany. August 6th, Austria declares war on Russia. August 23rd, Japan declares war on Germany. And this is kind of interesting. Japan was an ally with Great Britain since 1902. And so they jump in on this because they're wanting to join in to gain Germany's Pacific islands. Germany had islands in the Pacific, and Japan wants those territories. And so Great Britain decides to go and allow this alliance to continue, causing more issues. So Japan declares war on Germany. And then August 25th, Austria declares war on Japan. So you have Japan going to war against Germany, and Austria coming to the aid of Germany by declaring war on Japan. And that's going to be it for part one of the First World War. Again, very complicated, but if you follow the storyline of what takes place, you see how these alliances have come together, how this spark causes all of the countries to then declare war on one another, causing the First World War. I'll see you in a second.
Class, that's it for today. I know it seems kind of complicated with all these alliances and how the things fall into place, but it gives us a good standing now on going into the war itself and looking at what takes place with the opening maneuvers of the war, and then how the country is bogged down into trench warfare. We'll also look at some things that take place in regards to modern weaponry and some innovations for the war, and how World War I takes on its own, basically its own characteristic for what World War I kind of is known for. And so we'll be looking at that coming up next time. Have a great day.